Hey everybody, my name is Mulhern and I'm a DIYer. I've got a fair amount of experience with hand tools. I own some lower tier, mid quality, and higher quality tools. And today I'm going to be doing a review of a 3-piece tool set that I got from a company called UltraSteel. I was given these free to review. This set includes an adjustable wrench, a set of channel lock style pliers, and a regular set of pliers. I'm going to go through them one by one. We'll start with the adjustable wrench. Here's a picture showing both sides of the adjustable wrench. The heads are nicely polished, and there's a satin finish down the handle. Overall, this is a very nice looking wrench. Alright, this picture's a little busy, so let me walk through it. I also just happen to own an 8-inch Craftsman adjustable wrench and an 8-inch Proto adjustable wrench, so I thought it would be interesting to compare the three. The middle of this picture shows them laid out side by side. You'll notice that the UltraSteel most closely resembles the Craftsman, except that the tips on the jaws are squared off. The other difference you will notice here is that the thumb wheel adjustment is a little bit smaller on the UltraSteel than it is on the Craftsman. If we look at the column of images at the left, what you're looking at is the thumb adjustment in front of a lighted wall. At the top we have the Craftsman with very little gap. In the middle we have the Proto with even less gap. And at the bottom we have the UltraSteel with the most gap. All three wrenches have some play, but the UltraSteel definitely has the most. If you take a look at the upper right-hand corner of this picture, you'll see the Craftsman on top, the Proto in the middle, and the UltraSteel at the bottom. You can see that the UltraSteel's jaws are shaped most like the Craftsman, whereas the Proto has much narrower jaws. The other thing that you can see in this picture is the retainer pin for the thumb adjustment wheel. For both the Craftsman and the Proto, a pin is used. For the UltraSteel, a screw is used. I don't know how long that screw will hold up. And then lastly, we have the right bottom corner of this picture, which shows the three wrenches again from the reverse angle. There's not a lot new to learn from this picture, but I included it just for completeness. Since I had all three wrenches side by side and a digital caliper sitting on my desk, I thought it might be interesting to take some measurements and just see how the wrenches compare. They're actually all very similar. The biggest differences would be in the adjustable wheel diameter, where the UltraSteel is clearly smaller than the Proto and the Craftsman, and in the overall length, where the UltraSteel is about 1/8 of an inch shorter. The other thing that jumps out from this is that the Proto is clearly lighter weight than the UltraSteel and the Craftsman, but that's not really all that surprising because it has much thinner jaws. Alright, let's move on to the channel lock style pliers. First off, we'll talk about the finish. If you look at the left-hand side of this picture, you see a front and back image of the pliers. The jaw areas, the outer areas are all polished, and then the inner areas are just that matte finish. If you shift your eyes and look at the upper right-hand corner, those pictures show the edges. You can see that those are quite a bit rougher. Then we can move on and talk about the handles. The handles are dipped in a hard plastic. It's very grippy. It's very tight. I went ahead and tried to grab on tight and twist just to see if I could move the plastic, and it did twist with quite a bit of effort. These are not the worst I've seen. I've got another pair of pliers that the handles will slide right off of. I think these are going to stay on for a while, but they will probably loosen up and eventually slide off after a bunch of use. If you look at the rightmost picture in the middle, you can see that instead of a true pin, they used a bolt with a nut. This will probably work, but isn't the most durable. And then if you look at the lower right-hand corner, you'll see something that's kind of interesting. Here I'm comparing the ridges of the UltraSteel pliers to the Crescent brand, the actual Crescent brand of these. For the UltraSteel, you've just kind of got these kind of rough cut ridges, whereas with the Crescent brand, you've got stronger looking, more refined hooks. So definitely a difference in quality there. All right, moving on to my next picture. Here you can see the UltraSteel pliers laid out next to a similar set from a brand called Crescent. Both are adjusted to a middle position, and both are fully closed. The thing to note is that the jaws on the UltraSteel pliers interfere with each other, and this is as far closed as they go. Notice how wide the handles are. What this means is that if you were to grab onto something with these pliers and squeeze, You don't really know if you're squeezing against what you grabbed onto or if you're just fighting the handles of the pliers themselves. By contrast, there's a gap in the crescent pliers that prevents this interference. The handles touch each other. So if you're grabbing something with those, all of your squeezing force is going against what you're grabbing. All right, moving over to the right-hand side of this picture, there's a couple of things you can take note of. The first would be this upper jaw where the hinge is. Notice the outside edges. In a prior slide, I talked about how the finish was rough on the edges. You can really see it here. This really isn't the main point of this picture, though. What is the main point is that the jaws are completely closed in this picture. We can't squeeze any further. That yellow block is rectangular. Look at the tips of the jaws. Notice that they're not square. They're not parallel to each other. What this means is if you use those tips to grab onto the head of a bolt, you really wouldn't be gripping the bolt very well. The pliers do not close properly. All right, moving on to the standard pliers. Here we've got a picture showing the front and back of the pliers. You'll notice that the outer edges are polished and the inner edges are that matte finish as before. In this case, however, they haven't really fully polished the outer edges. On the right side handles of both images, you can see that they just sort of gave up before they got to the rubber part. The other thing to notice in this picture is that, as with the prior set of pliers, they used a bolt and a nut as opposed to a proper pin. Alright, so back to live video footage of me. This is the standard set of pliers I was just showing in the pictures. They work fine in this position, but if you try to adjust them into this other position, they are super rough and actually barely close. They're really bound up tight. And I don't want to try to back this nut off to loosen it up, because if I do, I know the nut's just going to unscrew while they're used. So bottom line, these are trash. You don't want these. So where does that leave us? At $28, these are not a deal. You do not want this tool set. The adjustable wrench is fine, but the other two are trash. This is not a deal. I've always believed that if you're going to buy a tool, if you need a tool and you're going to buy a tool, you should probably buy a decent one. Not the cheapest thing out there, not the most expensive, but a decent tool. It's going to work better, it's going to be more pleasant to use, and the next time you need it, you're going to be happy that you have it. It's probably going to last a lifetime. So, look elsewhere.